Captain James Norton walked through the corridors of the Galactic Council's observation warship with his 8-year-old daughter Sophie holding his hand. The ship was enormous, a floating fortress of metal and advanced technology that made human vessels look like toys. Sophie's eyes were wide and bright as she looked around at everything. She had never seen anything like this before. James carried their small travel bag in his other hand, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. This meeting would decide humanity's future among the stars. Sophie tugged on his sleeve and pointed at a viewport showing the endless darkness of space filled with distant stars. James smiled down at her and lifted her onto his hip so she could see better. She was small for her age, with dark hair and curious eyes that reminded him why he was doing this. Earth needed humanity to find its place in the galaxy. The future belonged to people like Sophie, and James would do everything in his power to secure it. The security checkpoint at the council chamber was staffed by guards from a dozen different alien species. A tall insectoid creature scanned James and Sophie with a device that glowed blue. Behind him stood a massive being made of what looked like living crystal, at least 3 meters tall. The guards showed no expression. They had seen thousands of alien delegations pass through these corridors. Humans were just one more species trying to prove their worth. A human diplomat named Lieutenant Marcus Harris met them at the chamber entrance. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and a decorated military background. His uniform displayed the symbols of Earth's greatest defenders. Behind him came 3 other members of the human delegation. Dr. Grace Park, a scientist known across several systems. Colonel Raymond Douglas, a military strategist. And Ambassador Henry Cooper, an experienced negotiator who had spent years studying alien culture. They entered the council chamber together. The room was vast and circular, with tiered seats rising on all sides. Council members from 47 different species occupied those seats. Some sat upright on legs. Others floated in specialized containment fields. A few moved slowly across their sections, their bodies shifting shapes as they settled. The diversity was overwhelming. Colors that did not exist in nature painted the walls. Technology beyond human understanding hummed softly throughout the chamber. At the center of it all sat the council elders, 5 beings who had ruled the galaxy for over 10,000 years. They wore robes of dark material that seemed to absorb light. Their faces were difficult to read because their features were so alien. But James could sense their judgment pressing down on the room. A Zerelian officer named Commander Keth stood near the center of the chamber. His blue skin was scarred from old battles. His eyes were cold and calculating. He spoke before the council could officially begin. His voice was sharp and cutting. "Another human delegation," Keth said, looking directly at James. "How many times must we listen to a Deathworlder species beg for acceptance? Your kind cannot even survive a single day without artificial life support outside your violent world. You kill each other over resources. You poison your own atmosphere. You breed like insects and consume everything in sight. Why should the Galactic Council waste time on a species so clearly inferior?" The chamber fell silent. Some council members leaned toward each other and whispered. Others made sounds that might have been laughter. James felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his expression calm. Sophie shifted in his arms, confused by the hostile words. He turned his head and whispered to her that everything was fine. Dr. Grace Park stepped forward. "The human species has existed for only 200,000 years. We have achieved spaceflight in the last 70 years. We have created technologies that rival some of the oldest civilizations here. Our capacity for learning and adaptation is extraordinary." Kath made a dismissive gesture. "Capacity for learning means nothing. Your species is weak. Your bodies are fragile. Your minds are driven by emotion rather than logic. I have seen humans fall to pieces from simple exposure to cold. I have watched humans collapse from the loss of a single individual they call a friend. You are not warriors. You are not even survivors in the true sense. You are mistakes. James stepped forward then, his voice steady and clear. The human species has survived on a world where the sun tries to burn you. The earth tries to shake you apart. The weather tries to freeze or drown you. And countless predators try to kill you every single day. We survived all of that. We evolved on a death world. We crossed oceans without knowing what was on the other side. We left our planet knowing the odds of success were nearly impossible. We did all of this to build a better future. That takes more than muscle and logic. That takes courage that you cannot measure. The council chamber fell quiet. Some members nodded slightly. Others seemed to consider James's words. A counselor from a peaceful species made a soft sound that might have been approval. Keth's expression darkened, but he said nothing more. He simply stared at James with eyes full of contempt and something else, something that might have been fear. The council elder in the center raised one hand. A projection appeared in the middle of the chamber, showing Earth from space. It was beautiful and terrible. A world of terrible. Oceans covered most of it. Mountains rose high into the sky. Storms swirled in the atmosphere. It was clearly a hostile world, a place that demanded everything from its inhabitants. The elder spoke for the first time, his voice like the grinding of mountains. The human delegation will present its case for full membership status in the Galactic Council. We will listen. We will observe. Then we will decide. James nodded respectfully. He held Sophie close to his chest. She had fallen asleep against his shoulder, exhausted from the journey and overwhelmed by the strangeness of everything around her. He looked around the vast chamber and saw the eyes of alien beings studying him. Studying humanity. They had come a long way from Earth to be here. They had risked everything. And they would not back down, not for Commander Keth, not for anyone. James Norton was a soldier, a father, and now a representative of his entire species. The weight of that responsibility was heavy, but he was ready to bear it. The council turned their attention to Dr. Park as she began to present humanity's achievements. But James kept watching Commander Keth. Something in the Zrelian's expression troubled him. It was not just contempt. It was something darker. Something that suggested Keth would not accept defeat quietly. As Sophie slept peacefully in his arms, James made a silent promise to his daughter. He would protect her. He would protect all of humanity. Whatever came next, he would face it with the strength of a Deathworlder. And he would make sure that every member of this council understood exactly what that meant. The council meeting had lasted 4 hours. James was tired, his mind worn down by the constant need to choose the right words, to present humanity in the best possible light. The council members had asked difficult questions about human violence, human hunger for resources, and human unpredictability. Ambassador Henry Cooper had handled most of the questions with skill, but James had been forced to defend humanity's past mistakes. During a break in the proceedings, Counselor Silo, one of the elder members, wanted to speak privately with James about human history. They moved to a smaller conference room while Dr. Park and the others continued their presentations. Sophie stayed with Marcus Harris in the delegation's quarters, drawing pictures and playing with toys. She was safe. She was far from any danger. James did not know that Commander Keth was watching and waiting. The Zrelian officer had been humiliated during the council session. James's speech about Deathworlders had shifted the atmosphere. Some council members were actually taking humanity seriously now. Keth could see it in their body language, in the way they leaned forward when the humans spoke. This was unacceptable. The humans had to be shown as weak. They had to be proven inferior. Keth made a decision that would change everything. He accessed the security network and found Sophie's location in the delegation quarters. She was alone except for one security guard, and that guard was stationed outside the door, not inside. Dazrelian moved through the corridors of the warship with purpose. He had a plan. It was simple and direct. Terrify the child. Create a scene. Show the council that human young were fragile, that they broke easily under pressure. When Keth reached the door to the delegation quarters, the security guard stood at attention. It was protocol. Any council member could move freely through the warship. The guard did not stop him. Keth entered the room. Sophie was sitting on the floor with colored pencils and paper spread around her. She had drawn pictures of the stars and the planets. Her pictures were simple, like all human children's art, but they showed imagination and hope. She looked up when Keth entered. She did not seem afraid. She simply smiled. This is how Keth would break her. With that smile, with her natural trust and innocence. Dazrelian moved toward her. His blue skin seemed to glow under the artificial lights of the warship. His scarred face was hard and cold. Sophie tilted her head, curious about the alien creature approaching her. She had been taught by her father to be polite to everyone. She stood up, still smiling. She had no concept of danger. She had been raised on a warship, surrounded by security and protection. Nothing bad happened to children who were protected like this. Keth reached down and his hand moved towards Sophie's shoulder. His intention was simple. He would grab her. He would speak to her in a harsh voice. She would cry. She would scream. Security would come running, and James would arrive to find his daughter terrified by a council member. The message would be clear. Human children were fragile. Humans could be broken, and humanity had no right to stand as equals with the powerful species of the galaxy. But something happened that Keth did not anticipate. The moment his hand touched Sophie, alarms flooded the warship. Red lights flashed throughout every corridor. Klaxons wailed a sound that made even alien species uncomfortable. The ship's defense systems had been programmed with one core rule: protect the human child at all costs. Captain James Norton had paid for the most advanced security protection available. No being could touch the child without triggering the alert. The alarm was not subtle. It was designed to bring security running in seconds. It was designed to announce to everyone on the warship that something was wrong, that a child was in danger. The sound echoed through metal walls and access tunnels. Keth jerked his hand away from Sophie as if he had touched fire. He had made a critical error. He had not considered that a Deathworlder captain would protect his young with such ferocity and such technology. Sophie looked up at Keth with sudden fear in her eyes. The smile was gone. She did not understand what was happening, but the alarms and the flashing lights scared her. She was just 8 years old. She did not have the capacity to understand galactic politics or the reasons why an alien officer had reached toward her. She opened her mouth to scream, but before any sound came out, the door burst open. Marcus Harris was there first, his weapon already drawn. He was a trained soldier who had spent his entire career preparing for threats. Behind him came 3 more security officers, their weapons up and ready. Their faces were hard and cold. They were not the smiling humans from the council chamber. They were Deathworld warriors, trained on a world where survival meant being ready to kill at any moment. "Step away from the child," Marcus said. His voice was like steel. It was not a request. It was a command backed by the training and the will to follow through. Keth moved back, raising his hands. He tried to speak, to explain, but the humans were not listening. They formed a protective wall around Sophie, and Marcus picked her up and moved her to the far corner of the room. Sophie clung to him, crying now, scared and confused. But the most significant sound was still to come. The running footsteps in the corridor outside grew louder. Heavy, rapid footsteps. The sound of someone moving with desperate speed. The sound of a father moving toward his child. Captain James Norton burst through the door. His face was red. His eyes were wild with the kind of rage that only a parent can feel when their child is threatened. He took in the scene in an instant. Sophie in Marcus's arms, crying and scared. Keth standing in the center of the room with his hands raised. The security officers with their weapons ready. James moved toward Keth with the speed and purpose of a predator. Behind him came Counselor Silo and Ambassador Cooper, both shocked by what had happened. But James did not see them. He did not see anything except the being who had threatened his daughter. "Did you touch her?" James asked. His voice was low and dangerous. It was the voice of a Deathworlder who had reached the end of his patience. Keth tried to speak, to explain that he meant no harm, that it was simply a test. But his words meant nothing now. Everything had changed in an instant. The entire dynamic of the negotiation had shifted. The Council's image of humanity had shifted. James Norton stood between his daughter and the rest of the galaxy. And in that moment, everyone understood that there were some lines that could not be crossed. There were some things that humans would protect with everything they had. There were some things worth dying for. And hurting a human child was one of those things. Captain James Norton stood motionless. His chest rose and fell with each breath. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. His eyes were locked on Commander Keth's face. The Zrelian officer tried to back away, but James moved with him, closing the distance. This was not a man in control of his emotions. This was something primal and ancient. This was a father whose child had been threatened. "I was only testing," Keth began, but his words died in the face of James's absolute rage. "You touched her," James said again. His voice was quiet now, which somehow made it more terrifying than shouting. "You put your hand on a child. My child. You thought you could do that and walk away." Keth raised his hands higher, attempting to show submission. But James did not see submission. He saw a creature that had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The Zrelian's blue skin looked pale now, less confident than it had been in the council chamber. Fear showed in his eyes, and that fear was justified. Marcus Harris still held Sophie in the corner of the room, shielding her from the confrontation. The little girl had stopped crying, but she was shaking. She did not understand what was happening, but she understood that something terrible had almost occurred. She buried her face in Marcus's shoulder and held on to him. James took another step toward Keth. The Zrelian officer took a step back. James was human, smaller and weaker than many species in the galaxy. But right now, standing in that room, he was the most dangerous thing that anyone had ever seen. His anger was not the cold, calculated anger of a trained warrior. It was the hot, desperate anger of a parent protecting their young. "In nature," James said, his voice steady and measured, "when a creature threatens the young of another, the parent fights back with everything it has. It does not negotiate. It does not discuss. It simply eliminates the threat. Do you understand what I am?" Keth did not answer. He continued backing away, his hands still raised. "I am a parent," James continued. "I am from a world where predators hunt, where the sky itself tries to kill you, where disease and hunger are constant threats. Humans learn early how to protect their young. We learn with everything we are, with every muscle and every instinct." The door to the quarters opened again. More security officers rushed in, weapons drawn. But they saw James standing over Keth, and they stopped. They did not need orders. They understood the situation. They formed a wall behind their captain, creating an impenetrable barrier between the Zrelian and any hope of escape. Counselor Silo stood in the doorway, his ancient face showing shock. Ambassador Cooper pushed past him, his hands raised in a calming gesture. But even he could see that words would not matter now. James Norton had moved beyond the realm of diplomacy. He was operating on a level that had nothing to do with negotiation or reason. James reached out, and for a moment, it seemed like he would strike Keth down right there in the room. His hand moved toward Disraelian's throat. Keth's eyes went wide. The officer had never been so close to death. He had never felt so helpless, but James stopped. His hand hovered for a moment, then dropped to his side. His entire body was shaking with the effort of restraint. The rage inside him was so powerful, so consuming, that holding it back required more strength than any physical action ever could. "If you ever touch her again," James said, his voice barely above a whisper, "if you ever come near her again, if you ever even look at her with anything other than respect, I will destroy you. Not kill you. Destroy you. I will hunt you across every star system. I will follow you through every wormhole. I will find you no matter where you hide. And I will make sure that every species in the galaxy understands what happens when you threaten the young of a Deathworlder." The promise was absolute. It was not a threat made in anger or desperation. It was a statement of fact, delivered with such certainty that no one in the room doubted him. Keth knew it was true. He could see it in James's eyes. This was not bluff or bravado. This was the deadly calm of someone who had already decided on a course of action. Marcus Harris carried Sophie out of the room, moving her away from the confrontation. The little girl was crying again, but she was safe. She was away from the threat. As he passed James, Marcus nodded to his captain. The gesture said everything. "I have her. She is safe. Do what you need to do." James did not look away from KETH. Ambassador Cooper moved forward slowly, his hand still raised. "Captain Norton," he said carefully, "we need to bring this to the Council's attention. This matter needs to be handled through the proper channels." James did not respond. He simply stared at Keth for a long moment. The Disraelian officer was visibly shaking now. He had made a massive mistake, and he knew it. His career was finished. His reputation was destroyed. And more than that, he had awakened something in the human captain that would not rest until justice was served. Finally, James turned and walked out of the room. His security team remained between him and Keth, their weapons still drawn. The message was clear. If Keth tried anything, if he attempted to run or fight back, they would stop him permanently. As James walked through the corridors toward the medical bay where Sophie was being checked for injuries, he sent word to all the human crew on the warship. The message was simple and direct. Secure the ship. Make sure every member of the human delegation is protected. Prepare for departure. The Disraelian officer had made his choice when he reached for Sophie. Now humanity would make theirs. The news spread through the council chambers like wildfire. By the time James arrived to meet with the council elders, every member knew what had happened. Some showed sympathy for the humans. Others looked uncertain. A few seemed to support Keth's actions, though they were careful not to say so openly. But the silence in the council chamber when James entered was absolute. The humans were not going to ask for understanding or forgiveness. They were going to demand justice. And the world would never be the same. Commander Keth was escorted to the detention block under heavy guard. His career was over. The council would decide his fate. But James already knew that nothing the council decided would ever be enough. Some things could not be forgiven. Some violations could not be forgotten. And threatening a human child had crossed that line. Sophie was safe. She had been examined by Dr. Park and found to be physically unharmed. But the trauma would stay with her. And that made James's anger burn even hotter. His daughter had been hurt. His daughter had been frightened. And every being on this warship would understand the cost of that action. The age of humans being underestimated was over. Sophie was asleep in the medical bay with Dr. Park watching over her. She had been given medicine to help her rest, to process the trauma without being fully aware of it. Marcus Harris had not left her side. He sat in a chair beside the bed, his uniform still bearing the marks of the emergency. His hands were steady, but his jaw was tight with anger. In the council chamber, James Norton prepared to address the entire assembly. He had demanded the right to speak, and the council had granted it. They wanted to hear what the human captain had to say. They wanted to understand what this meant for humanity's place among the stars. Captain James Norton stood in the center of the chamber, with Ambassador Cooper and Colonel Douglas on either side of him. The room was silent. All eyes were on him. Some were curious. Some were hostile. Some seemed to be waiting to hear if humans would finally show their true violent nature. James did not speak immediately. He let the silence stretch out. His hands were at his sides, his uniform neat and pressed, despite the chaos of the last few hours. When he finally spoke, his voice was clear and steady. "I want to explain what you witnessed today," James began. "Commander Keth reached for my daughter. This was not a gesture of curiosity or friendship. This was a threat. This was an attempt to intimidate and terrify a child. In doing so, Keth revealed something about himself and something important about my species." He paused, looking at each of the council members. His gaze was direct and unflinching. "My people come from a world you call a death world," James continued. "That name is accurate. Earth tries to kill us every single day. The sun burns us. The cold freezes us. Earthquakes shake our continents. Storms flood our cities. Predators hunt us. Disease kills us. We have survived all of this not because we are weak or timid. We have survived because we are willing to do whatever it takes to protect what matters to us." A counselor from a peaceful species, a being made of living light, flickered softly. James did not know if that was a sign of agreement or disapproval. "What you saw in that room was not anger born of ego or pride," James said. "That was the fundamental drive of a parent protecting their child. When a being from a death world has their young threatened, there is no negotiation. There is no discussion. There is only the determination to eliminate the threat and protect the vulnerable." Colonel Douglas stepped forward slightly. His military bearing was evident in every movement. He had commanded troops in battles across 3 star systems. He understood the language of strength. "Commander Keth believed that human young were fragile," the colonel said, his voice hard and measured. "He was wrong. But more than that, he believed he could threaten our child and face no serious consequences. He was also wrong. Among my people, touching a child without permission is one of the most serious violations that exists. It is a violation that can only be answered through overwhelming force." The reaction from the council was immediate. Some members leaned away from the humans. Others seemed to be processing this new information. The Zreelians in the chamber looked at Keth, who sat in a containment field, guarded by the warship's security forces. The Zreelian officer's fate was becoming clearer by the moment. "I will be direct with this council," James said. "What happened today has changed things. My daughter has been traumatized. My crew has been endangered. And my patience with those who disrespect humanity has been exhausted." He let those words sink in. The silence in the chamber was complete now. Even the ambient sounds of the warship seemed to fade away. "The Galactic Council has treated humanity as a curiosity," James continued. "We are the young species that barely knows how to leave our world. We are the primitive beings that need to prove ourselves worthy of a seat among the stars. But you have not asked the right question. You have not asked what happens when you push a death worlder too far. You have not asked what kind of species rises from a world that tried to destroy them. Ambassador Cooper stepped forward. He was an older man, with gray hair and the bearing of someone who had spent decades in diplomatic service. But his voice was not soft or negotiating. It was firm and commanding. "The humans have come to this council in good faith," Cooper said. "We have submitted ourselves to your judgment. We have answered your questions honestly. We have shown restraint in the face of disrespect and contempt, but that restraint has limits. Commander Keth crossed those limits today, and now you must understand what that means." The chamber erupted in quiet conversations. Council members whispered to each other. Some seemed uncertain. Others seemed afraid. A few appeared supportive of the human position. The Zrelians looked directly at their disgraced officer, and many turned away from him. James waited for the noise to die down before he spoke again. When he did, his voice was lower, more serious, more final. "I am going to tell you what would have happened if my daughter had been seriously hurt," James said. "I would have taken that as a declaration of war. The human delegation would have left this ship, and we would have returned to Earth and prepared for conflict. We would have done whatever was necessary to protect ourselves from a galactic council that had proven itself incapable of respecting the young of our species." He let that sink in. The implication was clear. Humans were willing to fight. Humans were willing to die. And humans would do both to protect their children. "But she is safe," James continued. "Physically, she is unharmed. Emotionally, she has been traumatized, but she is resilient. She comes from a species of survivors, and she will remember what happened here today for the rest of her life. She will remember that this council allowed a being to threaten her. She will remember that it was her father and her people who protected her, not the Galactic Council." The message was brutal and direct. The Council had failed to protect a human child. That was a fundamental failure. That was proof that the Council could not be trusted to keep humans safe. "I am not asking the Council to punish Commander Keth," James said, though his expression made clear that punishment was exactly what humanity expected. "Commander Keth has already been punished by what he has revealed about himself. He thought he could test humanity by threatening a child. He has instead revealed his own weakness and his own poor judgment." James straightened his uniform and looked directly at the council elders. "I am telling this council that humanity will not accept disrespect. We will not accept threats against our young. We will not accept being treated as a primitive species that can be tested and poked at like laboratory specimens. We are a species born from a death world. We are survivors, and we will protect what is ours with every breath we draw and every resource we possess." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the entire chamber. "If this council grants humanity full membership status and treats us with the respect that any advanced species deserves, then we will be valuable allies and partners. We will contribute to the peace and prosperity of the galaxy. We will share our knowledge and our strength with those who earn our trust." Another pause. The threat hung in the air unspoken. But if this council continues to treat humanity as inferior, to disrespect our young, to test us as if we were lesser beings, then we will withdraw from the galactic community entirely. We will return to Earth. We will prepare for isolation and conflict. And we will make sure that any being who threatens humanity pays a price that will echo across every star system for generations to come. The speech was finished. James stood tall and silent, waiting for the council's response. The silence that followed was the silence of beings who had finally understood. Humanity was not asking for acceptance. Humanity was declaring itself an equal power, ready and willing to fight for its place among the stars. Sophie slept peacefully in the medical bay, unaware of the war that had just been declared on her behalf. But when she woke, she would know that her father had fought for her. She would know that humanity would never allow itself to be treated as weak or primitive again. The age of underestimating humans was officially over. The vote in the Galactic Council took 3 hours to complete. Each species had to be consulted. Each member had to consider the implications of granting or denying humanity's request for full membership status. The tension on the warship was absolute. Human crew members waited in their quarters, aware that their future was being decided. Officers stood at their stations, ready for any order that might come from their captain. In the medical bay, Sophie woke to find Dr. Park and Marcus Harris still at her bedside. She was confused and disoriented, her mind not fully clear about what had happened. But the fear was still there. The memory of the alarms and the flashing lights would stay with her forever. Marcus picked her up and held her close. She was his captain's daughter, but she was also his responsibility as a human being. He had fought in battles across the stars, but this little girl's safety mattered more than any military victory could ever matter. When the vote was finally called, the result was unanimous. The Council voted to grant humanity full membership status in the galactic community, effective immediately. But that was only the first part of the decision. The second part was the censure of Commander Kath. The Council voted to remove him from his position permanently, to strip him of his title and rank, and to exile him from every Galactic Council station for the rest of his life. Kath was a broken being when they took him away. He had arrived at the warship as a powerful officer with authority and respect. He was leaving as a disgraced exile with nothing. The other Zrelians would not meet his eyes as he was escorted away. He had brought shame on his entire species by attacking a child. James Norton received the news in the command center of the warship. Around him, his human crew erupted in cheers and celebration. The cheering was not loud or wild. It was the cheering of soldiers who had fought a battle and won it. It was the cheering of people who had preserved their honor and secured their future. But James did not celebrate immediately. He went to the medical bay to see his daughter. Sophie was sitting up in the medical bed, eating soft food that Dr. Park had prepared. When she saw her father, she started crying again. Not from fear this time, but from the overwhelming relief of seeing him, of knowing that he was there and everything would be okay. James sat on the edge of the bed and pulled his daughter into his arms. She was so small, so fragile, so entirely dependent on the protection that the adults around her provided. He held her and let her cry against his shoulder. He did not try to comfort her with words. Sometimes physical presence is more powerful than any words could ever be. "Daddy, what happened?" Sophie asked, her voice small and confused. "You were very brave," James said, his voice steady and calm. "Someone tried to hurt you, but I stopped them. And now everything is going to be okay. You are safe. I will always keep you safe." Sophie held on to him and did not let go. She would need time to process what had happened. She would need therapy and care and attention, but she would survive. She was the daughter of a Deathworlder. She had courage in her blood. Over the next few hours, James met with the council elders. They came to him privately, seeking to understand more about humanity and what the future might hold. They were cautious and respectful in a way they had not been before. James had changed their perception of his species through his actions. Through his willingness to stand firm and defend what he believed in. An elder, who appeared to be made of crystalline material, moved close to James. When it spoke, its voice was like the tinkling of distant bells. "If your daughter had been seriously injured, would you truly have declared war on the Galactic Council?" The elder asked. James did not hesitate. "Yes," he said simply. "A species that cannot protect its young is a species that deserves to fail. I would have done whatever was necessary to ensure that every being in this galaxy understood the cost of threatening human children." The elder was silent for a long moment. You understand that the Galactic Council has military forces that far exceed your current capabilities, the elder said. I understand, James replied. But you have also learned today that humans are not easily intimidated by superior numbers or advanced weapons. We come from a world where we have survived extinction events, ice ages, and natural disasters that would have destroyed lesser species. War with humanity would not be a quick victory. It would be a long conflict with no guarantee of success. The elder made a sound that might have been approval. The Galactic Council made a mistake in underestimating your species, the elder said. We will not make that mistake again. Other council members sought out James and his team. They wanted to negotiate trade agreements with humanity. They wanted to establish formal relationships. They wanted to learn from the humans and find ways to cooperate with them. The shift in the political landscape was dramatic and complete. Ambassador Cooper worked through the night, finalizing the agreements and establishing the frameworks for human integration into the galactic community. It was complex work that required careful attention to detail and a clear understanding of what humanity's interests were. By the time the sun rose over the human settlement on the Warship, everything had changed. Humanity was no longer a species on probation. Humanity was a full member of the Galactic Council with all of the rights and responsibilities that status entailed. 3 days later, the warship began its journey back toward Earth. James stood on the observation deck with Sophie, showing her the stars through the viewport. She was healing slowly and with setbacks, but she was healing. The trauma would not disappear, but it would fade with time. Will I ever see the council again? Sophie asked her father. James looked at his daughter and smiled. Yes, he said. When you are grown, if you want to, you will go to the council chambers yourself. And when you do, every being there will know who you are. They will know that you are the daughter of a Deathworlder. They will treat you with respect. Sophie nodded, satisfied with that answer. She went back to looking at the stars. That night, in the captain's quarters, James received a message from Earth. The government had watched everything. They had seen the council vote. They had heard about the confrontation with Commander Keth, and they had understood the message that James had sent to the galaxy. The message was simple. Humanity was no longer weak. Humanity was no longer inferior. Humanity was a species born from the toughest world in the galaxy, and that world had forged them into something greater than the Council had ever imagined. Over the following months, humanity's position in the galaxy changed dramatically. Trade agreements were signed. Military alliances were formed. Human scientists began sharing their knowledge with other species, and other species began sharing their knowledge with humans. The exchange of information and culture was rapid and transformative. And through it all, James Norton never forgot the moment when his daughter was threatened. He never forgot the rage that had filled him. He never forgot the clarity of knowing that he would do anything, absolutely anything, to protect his child. That knowledge shaped everything he did from that moment forward. It shaped his negotiations with the Council. It shaped his decisions about humanity's future. It shaped his decisions about humanity's future. It shaped the way he commanded his crew and carried out his duties. Sophie grew up with a story that she would tell for the rest of her life. The story of how her father had stood against the Galactic Council and won. The story of how humanity had declared itself an equal among the stars. The story of how one Deathworlder father had changed the future of his entire species through nothing more than courage and love. The warning that James had delivered to the Council echoed across every star system. It reached every species and every world. The message was clear and unmistakable. Humanity was here to stay. Humanity was strong. Humanity would protect its own. And anyone who forgot that lesson would do so at their own cost. As the warship approached Earth, James stood on the bridge with his senior officers. The blue and green marble of his world filled the viewport. It was beautiful and terrible, just like his people. It was a death world that had created survivors. And now those survivors had their place among the stars. Colonel Douglas stood beside James, looking at Earth with the same sense of pride and purpose. "We did it, sir," the colonel said quietly. James nodded. "We did," he agreed. "We showed them what it means to be human. We showed them what we will do to protect our young. We showed them that a species born from a death world is not something to be taken lightly." The warship descended through Earth's atmosphere. As it entered the clouds, James thought about Sophie sleeping safely in the medical bay. He thought about all the children on Earth who would grow up in a galaxy where their species was respected. He thought about the future that he had secured for them through his actions. The age of underestimation was over. The age of respect had begun. And humanity would never again be treated as anything less than what they truly were. A species born from the harshest world imaginable, forged in struggle and absolutely uncompromising in their determination to survive and thrive. The warning had been delivered, and the galaxy would never forget it.